that was our big motivator there. What you will find is that sign standards do vary by zoning district. So the signage that you would be allowed to have in that new neighborhood business district would be a lot less than what you could have in a more intensive commercial district that's on the highway. That makes sense? So we tried to make it so it was corresponding to that. Abandoned signs now have to be removed. People can't just abandon them, close the building down, and you get a rusty old sign that stays there, falls down, that kind of thing. The ordinance now lists which signs are prohibited. Billboards are listed as a prohibited sign, so it's very clear that those are not allowed. The election sign standards match what's in Indiana code as far as days and size and all those kind of things. We just took it from Indiana code. And there are also now standards in the ordinance for temporary signs. So those are kind of a Wild West kind of thing sometimes with people putting temporary signs in right-of-ways and on telephone poles and all over the place. So this is attempting to do some regulation of where you can have them, what you can have, how big they can have, how long you can have them, that kind of thing. Let's talk about subdivision standards real quickly. When we wrote this, we updated it mostly for new changes in technology and best practices. So it was a pretty dated subdivision set of standards, and we just kind of brought it into the future a little bit. It was done to coordinate with the city's new design standards manual that Ron worked on before he left. So there's cross-referencing there, and they go hand in hand. Now is what I really want to spend most of our time on tonight, and that is actually practicing applying some of this information. So we're going to use not only your new Unified Development Ordinance, but you guys have a new comprehensive plan that was adopted last year also. And you're going to find some of the criteria that refers to that. So without further ado, I want to make it really clear again that while I'm showing you locations on a map, I have no idea. It might be Sarah's property. I don't know who owns it. I just randomly selected something. So this is absolutely fake. Doesn't have any correspondence to what anybody may have asked about or anything. So here is our fake request. We have property that's zoned R2, which is now called low density residential, and someone wants to rezone it to I1. The light blue that you see on that map is existing I1. The brown that you see on the map, which includes the site, is the R2, low density residential. You also see some lime green on that map, which is B2, a business district. The black and red lines that you see there are the corporate limits, just to help you kind of get your bearings there. So your job is to figure out if we're going to rezone this little square property in the red there from R2 to light industrial. Let's find out a little bit more about it. So if we look at Indiana code and at your ordinance, these are the 5 criteria that you're supposed to use to grant a rezoning. What is the first one? The comprehensive plan. So you've got this new comprehensive plan. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to go through all these and look at them one by one, so I won't read them all for you now. But these are directly from Indiana code. So we have no wiggle room on this. We don't make up our own. Indiana state law says this is what every plan commissioner and every city council has got to use to make that rezoning decision. Okay? A reminder that the way rezonings work is that plan commission has a public hearing, and and then makes the recommendation to city council, but it's up to city council to make the final decision. So both plan commission and council have to look at these 5 things. Let's find out a little bit more. So number 1 said the comprehensive plan. On the right, you'll see the map at the top of the right side is the final future land use map that was included with your comprehensive plan. That's the big thing you need to look at with number 1, is what's the use we're looking at in the future for that part of the community. The bottom is a blow-up of that area with a little red box on it. The yellow that you see there is residential. So the future shows that this area should be residential. Okay, so keep that in mind. Other things that you may want to look at in the comprehensive plan, we're not going to sit here and go through the whole plan tonight, we just don't have time. But there are also goals that are in the comprehensive plan that may have to do with this. There's a future transportation map that's in here, so you'll want to take a look at that. See if it makes sense for industrial to be on the type of streets that might be the categories in this area. And also I want to explain the funny blob with the black stripes that's on the left. That is a redevelopment area, designated redevelopment area. So you can see this little red square is not within that designated redevelopment area. All right, so if we look at number 1 in the comprehensive plan, does it look like a zoning to I-1 matches what the future land use plan and the comprehensive plan shows? No, I would agree. It's pretty clear that that is a no. Let's take a look at some of the other criteria. The second state law criteria is basically asking what's happening around it. What's happening around this area? And if you're familiar with this area, Wilder Street and Main Street, it's a pretty mixed area. There's a little bit of everything going on there right now. So adjacent uses are mixed. There's institutional, residential, commercial, industrial. There's all kinds of uses in that area right now. So
what would classify as institutional?
Sorry?
What would classify as institutional in that area right there, as you see?
I think the bread of life.
That's
Maybe.
like a suitcase or something.
Yeah. I think that's where I got that, yeah.
It's not a community owned, or
I'm sorry?
It's not a community, it's not a Greensburg owned, or anything like that.
Yeah, but neither is a hospital often, or a school system, or whatever. You can have, churches would all be institutional uses, for example, or museums, or those kind of things. So we've got a mix of different uses. If we look at the second one, would industrial fit? Would more industrial fit with what is going on in that area? That one's not quite as clear to answer, is it, as the first one? So how would you decide where you come down on this one? How many of you, when you've got a new case before you, go out and actually drive by and look at it with fresh eyes? Thank you, thank you. That is, I mean, you live in a community for a long time, and you may have something in your head that really isn't what it looks like anymore. You know, you may be thinking of it as it was when you moved here, or when you were a kid, or something. So it helps to go out and actually do what I call a drive-by and kind of see what's in the area. Because of open door laws and ethical laws that the state has, don't engage with neighbors to talk about a case, don't engage with the applicant and ask for a tour, but do a drive-by. That's perfectly safe. So we can see some of the information Google Maps, but it doesn't match what you can find out if you go out in person and take a look. So, you know, I would encourage you to do that before you go to the meeting. Do your drive-by, look at your staff report, start to get in your mind, you know, when you're doing that drive-by, would more industrial fit into that area, or would it upset things? Okay? Number 3, let's see what number 3 is on our list. Number 3 from the state law says, the most desirable use for the land in each district. That's basically saying, what is the highest and best use that we have? So if you look at this, again, this is our future land use map that I pulled from the comprehensive plan, and that kind of sets the direction for the community's future. The purple that you see up there is industrial for the future. Is that industrial located in the central part of the community, the old downtown area? No. It looks like it's located more on the outskirts. And typically when we're looking at this for industrial, we're thinking about, you know, industrial uses anymore have typically larger lots and more of a larger footprint than what some of the older industrial uses might have had. So allowing that on the undeveloped area, or pushing that to that undeveloped area on the outskirts of the community, is what the comprehensive plan is looking at. You should also, besides just looking at this future land use plan, if you've got a local economic development plan, that is important to look at, and I'm sure staff would be getting that input too before it went to public hearing. Does the economic development plan have a certain vision or a certain idea for industrial uses or for redevelopment of this area or anything like that? So when we say comprehensive plan, we're not just necessarily saying this one plan. You can look at other plans that the city has done and look at those also. It might be a park master plan, a transportation plan, a downtown plan, a bicycle pedestrian plan. Those things are all valid to look at for recommendations for use. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4 from state law says the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. So if this property were rezoned to industrial, we need to think about what that economic impact will be on others, not just the applicant. So what would the impact, let's start, what would that impact be on the adjacent surrounding uses? And so you've done your drive-by, you're familiar with that area. You can start to think, if we had more industrial here, what would that do to the residential that's right there? Would that make it harder to sell their property, or their property values would decrease, or harder to rent the property? So those are the kind of considerations that we're looking. And then if you think about the whole community, you know, industrial we usually see as a good thing because they pay a lot of taxes and usually consume less services than they pay in property taxes. But are they going to require special services or infrastructure upgrades that are going to cost the money, cost the city money? Is the fire department going to be able to deal with more industrial in that area? You know, those kind of considerations are really important. So we have to think about the impact on the adjacent property owners, but also on the whole community and how that might impact property values. All right. And then we have one more. I love this one. This one, number 5, the state law says, is this responsible development and growth? Basically what this saying is, do we have the stuff in place here and now to support this? Are the streets wide enough? Do we have enough water pressure? All those things, do we have this now to support this? And this is really important because a lot of communities in Indiana do what I call pre-zoning, where they rezone something long before it really is ever practicable to be developed as that zoning district. And people like to get their property rezoned so they can sell it at a higher price for commercial or something. But when you rezone property, that's you saying, this is ready to go now as industrial. This is ready to go now as commercial. This is ready to go now as multifamily. So this is asking us to stop and look and say, can we support this now? Can the streets there take more truck traffic that we're gonna get from industrial? Or are we gonna have to widen them before that can happen and upgrade that? Is there adequate water pressure to serve this use? So those kind of things we have to look at and figure out if this is really doable. Does that make sense, everybody? So what group do you think is going to help you on this criteria with a recommendation? Which new group did we talk about tonight that's going to look at applications? Technical Review Committee. So the Technical Review Committee is somebody who's definitely going to be able to help you on this rezoning by saying, you know, we have it in our plans to upgrade that road, but it's not going to happen for 10 years. Or, you know, we know the water pressure is not adequate in this area right now, and we're working on it, but it's not there yet. So those kind of things are really important questions to have answered for this number 5. Is it ready to go now, or is it something down the road?
But the other thing we found on the very first criteria for comprehensive plan, that was already ruled out no, so we should not grant it.
You're jumping ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, you're good. You're my transition. So, now I'm gonna make you vote. Look at these 5 things here. Do you think that they get the rezoning? Have they been able to satisfy all 5 of these things? No. Does anybody disagree? I think it's pretty clear that they don't justify from multiple different points on those criteria. So if you do not check all 5 of those boxes, Plan Commission recommends denial, City Council denies it.
But if you get to number 1 and it's already a no, then you don't have to worry about the other 4.
No, but what I want you to start doing is when you make a motion now and you say, I want to recommend approval, or I want to, make a motion to deny, I want to make a motion to deny because they don't meet criteria number 1. This doesn't match our comprehensive plan. So be specific about what you're basing your decision on. Yeah.
Not so much in the city, I haven't seen it on the city planning commission, but in the county planning commission. As soon as we hit there, I've denied 4 or 5 different ones, because it's not a new comprehensive plan. But as soon as you say that, 5 of the guys go, yeah, but that's only a recommendation. So you gotta really worry about that on these commissions, because it's either the law or it's a recommendation, and that'll be.
So Plan Commission is always going to have a recommendation on the
No,
result.
what I'm saying, they're saying that is not the law, the comprehensive plan is not
Oh,
the law.
no, it's a policy.
It's only a recommendation.
Right.
That's what the county says.
Yes.
The
I'm
comprehensive
saying we have
plan,
to be careful with that, because that'll be the first thing out of every one of the developers or other people's mouths. But that's not really the law, that's just a recommendation.
well,
And that's what was
the
said.
plan
I'm
itself
saying-
is a recommendation, but state law goes right back and says,
That law applies to Decatur County as well, so.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't
tell them to
make-
look up IC 3674603, which lists the comprehensive plan as the number 1 thing in that list.
then they're setting themselves up to be sued.
They are.
But
It's
it
not
says
what
there, it
I'm,
says-
Yeah, no, I know.
It says pay reasonable regard, doesn't
Yeah,
say.
pay reasonable regard, if you look at the case law, means you better have a damn good reason
To go against.
to like let one of them go. And I will tell you, the only example I have ever had in my life where that made sense is I had a county which had not had a new plan since the 1960s. The plan they had was so out of date, nothing made sense. So we were updating it. It had gone through the public hearing, everybody loved it, unanimous recommendation from Plan Commission. There was an economic development project that was being fast-tracked through. The economic development project, they did not want to wait until the new plan was adopted because they were timing and breaking dirt and financing and all that kind of state funding was sitting on it. So the county commissioners in this case, instead of the city council, said, well, it doesn't match our old 1968 plan, but we have this new plan which had a public hearing, everybody loved it, Plan Commission recommended approval, we're going to be adopting it probably next month. We're confident enough to go ahead and approve this rezoning. But that's the kind of pretty unusual extenuating circumstance that they're talking about in case law, if you read up on that. So I am not an attorney, but for decades I have hung out with a lot of land use attorneys and I've learned from a lot of them. So they really mean a very unusual, specific situation when you're not going to meet 5 out of 5 on that. That makes sense, everybody? All right, let's try another one. Now let's try, oops. I forgot I went backwards already. There we go. Let's try a fake special exception. So remember, special exceptions are those uses that we've said we probably want to look on a lot by lot or site by site basis to see if it makes sense. So here, one of the new special exceptions that you have in your zoning ordinance are for short-term rentals, Airbnbs, okay, Airbnbs that are not owner-occupied. So let's pretend that we've got somebody, again, in the same area on Main Street. They have a home that's zoned R2, one of these big old homes, and they want to make it into an Airbnb. So let's walk through that process. So on this one, the special exception criteria, the state said, we're going to give you the variance criteria, but the special exception criteria you come up with yourself and put in your local ordinance. So these are only in your local ordinance. They're not in the state law. These again reflect what most other communities use. They're kind of some standard language that you see, but these are specifically in your local ordinance. So the first one says, having this Airbnb is not going to be detrimental to Airbnb without the owner living there. It's not going to be detrimental to public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. What does that mean? Well, let's break that down a little bit. When we talk about public health and safety impacts, that's something, again, we're going to look at our friends on the technical review committee to help us with, okay? When we talk about public health and safety, we're thinking about traffic safety, fire safety, emergency response. Could be things like adequate site visibilities for drivers pulling in and out, fire truck access, all those kinds of things. That is what we mean by public health and safety. Public health actually can mean things like excessive noise or air quality or water quality or things like that. Is this on a septic system still, or is it part of city sewer? So those kind of things. Ask us to think about public morals. Public morals might be something that you think about as far as allowing an undesirable business. My example, again, I live in Indianapolis. There's a Chuck E. Cheese near where I live in Castleton. How many of you have ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese? Yeah, great experience. But anyway, been there for decades. I mean, I took my kids there when they're little, and they're in their late 20s, early 30s now. And guess what? A couple years ago, we had a Hustler that opened up right next to Chuck E. Cheese. City of Indianapolis had a new ordinance, and they totally dropped the ball on regulating sexually oriented businesses. I call them SOBs. So we now are stuck with this SOB next to the Chuck E. Cheese. If you get up to the Castleton Mall, you might want to take a tour just for fun. But that's where I think the morals comes into this as a zoning type question. And then the last thing is general welfare in that phrase. And if you do the research on that, it goes all the way back to like the 1950s or 60s. I can't remember now, I don't have the case in front of me. But the Supreme Court of the United States interpreted general welfare to include things like appearance, aesthetics, history, and culture preservation. So it's how your community looks and the character of your community and the appearance of your community fall under general welfare. And that's from the highest court in the land. It's been that way for a long time. So number one, if we have this Airbnb that goes in this location and we don't have the property owner living there, is it going to cause issues with public health, safety, morals, or general welfare? It's kind of hard to say yet. That's something, you know, the fire department may have feedback on that. I don't know. Or the city engineer may have feedback. We're going to find out a little bit more about some other things related to this amendment. But that's kind of what we're looking at with this one. The second criteria is that it's not going to be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity. So what's going to happen to the neighbors if this happens? Is it going to cause them to have trouble selling their property or renting their property if there's an Airbnb next door? So is it going to impact their property values? Is it going to impact the use and enjoyment of their site? Is it going to be a party house that, you know, people are using for parties and there are lots of noise or things like that, or cars parked everywhere? That would be a question I think you'd want to be asking. That might be one of those things where you use one of those permanent conditions, that you start to limit maybe how many people can be in this Airbnb or something, if that's a legitimate concern.
So I was going to, how do you control that?
You put this written,
With the
that written commitment tool that's on that property, so this owner and future ones know that. Now, is Sarah gonna sit in front of the house and count how many people go in and out all the time? No, but if you get a complaint from a neighbor, then you
make a year temporary permit.
sorry?
You make a year temporary permit.
Like a temporary special
Oh.
exception.
Go for a year, then if you have complaints.
Yeah.
We do that
You
a lot
could.
with special exceptions, of like home,
Business and stuff.
to make sure there's not.
Right.
A lot of calls for
Right.
waivers.
So saying, okay, we'll approve this for a year or something and then review it again, yeah, that might be a way to handle that. You know, and then you can check if there have been police runs and things like that, yeah. Okay, let's see, what else? So again, what the court case law has shown us is that we're talking about significant impact on the neighbor's use. So if somebody says, I just don't like that my neighbor's not gonna be living in that house, that's not really a valid reason to turn it down. So it's gotta be something that really impacts their use and enjoyment of their neighboring property. All right, let's look at the rest of these. The third one asked, are there adequate utilities, roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities and infrastructure? So, about the only weird one I could think about is if something like this was still on an old septic system or something like that, or if it didn't, if there were issues with fire code or something by this becoming an Airbnb. But again, that's something that, who are you gonna look to for a recommendation on that? Technical Review Committee is gonna be able to tell you if there are any of those issues going on. Number 4 asks, are there measures that can minimize traffic congestion here? And so the question you'd want to know, is there traffic congestion here already? Are there problems with pulling in and out of the driveway or parking on the street along Main Street? What's our situation there now? What are some issues we have? So again, the city engineer's office would assist with that as part of that technical review committee review. And you're gonna wanna make sure that it's gonna be safe access here. And so that if we're just having one, tenant or renter or something, and you're limiting the number of people, not so much. If it's 10 people who are gonna be coming in and there are 10 bedrooms in this big old house, or 8 bedrooms or something, then that's a bigger concern. So some of it will have to do with how big the property is. Yeah,
So if a person wanted to rent this property, would you want to put in a restriction about parking, that they might have an RV or a trailer or whatever?
ooh, that's a good one. I hadn't even thought about that, yeah, on this. Yeah, that would be a good question to ask is, if there is room to park something like that, if you've got people that are gonna be coming in and staying for a while, yeah. It might be tight.
Then what if there's a future state highway issue going through there that's gonna limit parking?
Exactly, yeah,
This property, I know for a fact where that's at, and that's gonna be an issue there.
right. So that's a very good point that hopefully the technical review committee will bring to your attention, but then also you may want to talk about some at your meeting, your public hearing on this. Okay. Good. So if we look at number 5, the 5th criteria says that the special exception is only valid if it's in a district where the use is permitted. So we're in R2, if you look at the top of that chart, you follow it down, short-term rental, not owner-occupied, special exception. If you look below that, if it's owner-occupied, they don't have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. The idea is if the owner's living there, they're gonna probably control the threat of the party house and some things like that we've seen in other places. So there is a difference here that we've got in the ordinance. So it is allowed in that zoning district. But if you were zoned C1 conservation and you wanted to put a short-term rental in, you would not be able to do that because it's not something that would be allowed in that first column, that C1 district. Okay. The other part of that statement on number 5, and I just didn't put this all on the same slide, it's the same criteria. The last part of it says all other requirements set forth are applicable and are met. And this is one of those things where we have special use standards that we put together for this short-term rental or Airbnb use. So those include that you can't use, for example, if you've got an RV in your driveway, you can't use that for an Airbnb, okay? That's not another space. The maximum overnight occupancy can only be 2 persons per sleeping area, not to exceed 10 people. So these are some extra standards we've put in place. So if somebody comes in and they've got 6 rooms in this big mansion and they want 12 people, does that meet this standard? No. So, there's some standards about signage too, with information that has to have quiet hours, maximum occupancy, and 24-hour telephone number so people can reach the owners. So these are just some special extra standards that were attached to this unique use that would not apply to all the other uses that might happen in Greensburg. But these are fairly common things that we've learned over the years for Airbnbs. The other thing is I'll point out that our Unified Development Ordinance parking section also requires 1 additional parking space for each bedroom in an Airbnb. So they've got to have enough room on this lot to satisfy the parking on the lot, not on the street, not on the neighbor's lot, but on that parcel. They have to be able to satisfy that minimum parking requirement. So we do have other uses in that whole chapter that are set up with special standards. It's not just Airbnb, there are other uses that you can look in there that have these standards. So if we look at these, we've got 5 criteria for special exceptions. Would you be comfortable granting, with the information we have right now, granting this unoccupied or non-owner occupied Airbnb this special exception?
Wouldn't be parking.
Yeah, probably wouldn't, it'd be hard to get that parking on there, right. So as part of this, you would obviously have a plan that would show how they were gonna supposedly fit this parking on there. You know, you'd have more information, you would have had reviewed by the technical review committee. So you're gonna be getting more information than what I've given you here. My purpose was just kind of to talk through the standards that you have and make sure that you understand that whether it's state law standards or local ordinance standards, they have to meet all of them to get whatever they're trying to do, whether it's a special exception, a variance, a rezoning, whatever. It's all the standards that must be met. Otherwise, it's kind of breaking a law, whether it's state or local. So this is a big deal, and just trying to keep you guys safe on this. The other thing to keep in mind, we had a couple of thoughts that came up. This may be one of those things where there are written commitments or permanent conditions that go with this. So this might be a good opportunity, and the applicant is not going to volunteer these. These are things that you are allowed legally to say, you know, I'm going to approve this. I think it meets all 5 criteria based on what we got from the technical review committee and the site plan, but I think we need to attach this written commitment to ensure that blah, 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 blah. So that's perfectly fine to do that. Okay. So that is kind of what we are working with now. Your new Unified Development Ordinance. We kind of highlighted some of the new stuff that's in there. We highlighted how the processes work, who does what a little bit. Are there questions that you all who are going to be, you know, the rubber hits the road with the Plan Commission, BZA, and council members? Any questions you guys have about how you use this information or where you find the information?
Just maybe walk me through this mentally for me, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in and they want a rezoning request, they're gonna go to Sarah's office and make the request. So then before it even goes to the planning commission, you're gonna have the technical review committee look it over?
Actually, you're gonna do a pre-meeting?
Yeah, first, any
You're gonna
application.
recommend a pre-meeting, right?
Yeah. And in that pre-meeting, whether Sarah does it virtually or in person or whatever, she's probably gonna say, what are you gonna do with this property when it's rezoned? You know, kind of ask those questions to try to figure out, oh, well, maybe they might need a special exception too after it's rezoned. Or if they rezone to this other zoning district, maybe they won't have to get a special exception. So she's gonna look at all these possibilities and paths. She's gonna say, you're gonna have to combine those two lots and do a subdivision plat, whatever it is that she finds out from them. So yeah, the pre-meeting first, then they make the application. In that application, you're gonna have regular meetings of the technical review committee. Technical review committee is gonna look at it, probably a rezoning application, they're not gonna spend a lot of time on. There's not gonna be a plan that is associated with it yet, but they may be able to say, oh man, we know we don't have the sewers extended in that area yet, or whatever it may be. So this may be premature. So that may be the recommendation that you get from the technical review committee. So hopefully you'll have a little more information when we go through those 5 state law criteria.
Well, I guess that was the next piece where I was going.
Yeah.
Those 5 criteria in that, is the technical review committee actually going to fill out a form, answer all 5 of those questions, whether it applies or not?
No,
And submit that as part of the record? Why
That's
wouldn't
the
we?
plan commission.
Why wouldn't we?
Because they're just the technical experts, so not all of those things apply to them. They're the ones that can tell you about utilities and drainage and roads and stuff, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily gonna have any more insight on property values of adjacent property or whatever that you're gonna have.
So the planning
The
commission
plan
is going,
commission.
somebody is going to fill out those 5 questions.
The
and-
plan
Yes.
commission,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
And
the
then that's what they
applicant,
base,
if
well,
you do this
yes.
right, the applicant is gonna fill out the answers to those 5 things.
If I'm the applicant, it's gonna be yes on all of them, whether it
No,
is or
no,
isn't. But-
why? Because, yes, I need number 1, because the comprehensive plan shows this area matches the zoning or whatever. And that's gonna take some work with Sarah to help them through that.
But our
Once
due
they get to
diligence,
the
I
meeting,
think we need to fill that out. And then that would accompany whether it's our approval or our denial, right?
Okay,
In
let's,
my mind, I
let's
think.
back up a minute. So, once the technical review committee looks over it, okay, then when I send the information out to the plan commission on what's coming before them, that's where I relay, you know, this is what's going on. You know, that's when they can start looking at those 5 things. And I can let them know as well, this does not meet our comprehensive plan. Or this is, you know, the welfare of, you know, what's around them and the people around, that kind of thing. The plan commission will make a positive or negative recommendation to the council because at their meeting, they're gonna go through that checklist of 4 or 5 things.
I guess that's what I'm saying. When it comes to me and the council, I want to see that checklist filled out and signed by somebody in the planning commission that said,
right,
yes, 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 no, and then that's why it got denied. And then it's really simple when it comes back and that person that submitted the application wants to know, well, why didn't you guys approve this on the council? We can say, well, look, you didn't meet criteria number 3 or 4.
yes.
So I'm just saying, I'd like that to be in black and white and really easy for
Yeah.
us as the council to be able to
And that's why
accept,
we
approve, or
will be
deny.
having 2 people from council on the plan commission as well. But, yes, and so, you know, keep in mind that this is a whole new process in a lot of ways with this UDO. So we are learning, the boards are learning, and as we go along, you know, please let me know if there's something that you would like to see. And yes, that is not a problem. That's
So
not a problem.
what I always recommend in my communities is you should put the burden on the applicant to answer those questions. Let them know this is how we make our decisions. We follow the state law guidelines. So as part of this, here are the 5 criteria for rezoning. You tell us why you meet all those, not yes or no, but why. And that's what a lot of communities already do that. And it makes a lot of difference because when they get to you in front of the plan commission or the council, it's not them necessarily just standing up here and saying, it'll be good for the world and here's some pretty pictures. they know that they have to concentrate on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So
And our comprehensive plan is online, that they
Yeah,
can look at that.
right, so I recommend that just be, these criteria become a sheet in the application, that you put the burden, and it may take some conversations with Sarah for them to understand how to fill it out. It may take them hiring somebody who's like an attorney, or bringing their engineer, or somebody who's done this kind of thing. Believe me, this happens in other communities all the time. So putting the burden on the applicant to prove that they meet your local standards should not be your job. It shouldn't be your job to do that work for them, okay? You're asking them to come prepared with a complete application, a complete submission, to give you everything that you need to meet to make that decision, including whatever those state law standards are. Do you get where I'm coming from on that?
I do, I just don't want to put so much burden on people they don't want to develop in our community either, right? So.
It's not gonna
You gotta
happen.
find that line too.
Yeah,
right?
well, let me tell you, I mean, we're talking even unsophisticated rural counties and stuff make that part of their application packets. That
But if it's
is,
state law, they have
it's state law, so there's no reason that you can't. I mean, I think it's fairer to the applicant, frankly, and the neighbors, if they know from the beginning what you're basing your decision on. So if you say, here are the 5 things from state law, you gotta satisfy the rezoning, then at least the applicant knows up front what they're trying to convince you of. Or the neighbors know if they've got problems, which ones they need to talk about. We think this is a problem with health, safety, and public welfare because the traffic is already really bad here. And, you know, those kind of things. So it helps guide that discussion during the public meeting to the relevant stuff, which, you know, again, I've sat through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these meetings over the years. And if you don't direct it to what's relevant, pretty soon you're off here and off here and talking about things that have nothing to do with those legal criteria.
And do we have, is our application packets all been updated, and is that, you know, is that ready to go? Do you have all that information for someone who wants to come in and fill out?
for
an
like a
application?
rezone or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got all the
Is
criteria.
it old, or is it, I mean, this is
The
an old
applications-
process, so is it?
The application's the same. I will add the criteria to it, which I've got that all saved to my computer. That's no big deal.
You're gonna do the same thing with the BZA
BZA,
applications
yeah, for
because
variances, special exceptions, and rezones, it's different criteria. So it's gonna all go in
come to
town.
us why they need this variance.
Exactly, right.
Rather than just stamping everything comes through.
Right, and that's it, especially the BZA, my BZA members again, you see people who come in and they don't want to do something because it's going to cost them money. Legally, that's not a valid argument. So then they know from the very beginning when they make the application, they need to be able to convince you what's unique about that property. You know, it's because the city took all this right of way when they widened it and I don't have a front yard now. Or that we've got this really steep slope, or this is an old historic lot that's only 50 feet wide and was developed originally under old standards, so now modern garages don't fit on it. Whatever those things are, but they know then what to focus on. Yeah, and if you don't, I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. Feel free to get online, look at what other communities do, compare yourselves and your standards, but I think you'll find that everyone's found it's safest legally to stick to what those state law requirements are and what those local ordinance standards are. At the end of the day, if you try it and in a year you say, boy, these special exception standards that we made up and put in our ordinance, we really need to add another one, that's okay. You can amend the ordinance to do that. Or you can find out that the county does one that you didn't think about, and it works for them, so you wanna add that, or you wanna change the wording slightly in one of them, that's all okay.
Just can't mess with the ones that are state.
Yeah, so try what's in your ordinance now. Make notes as you go along and say, I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole on this one. And then adjust if you need to. But base what you're doing on legal criteria, not on who knows who's lived in this town this long, who brings the prettiest pictures to the meetings.
Who's a big developer in town?
Right, I've seen all those dog and pony shows over the years, and you've got to get away from that to protect the community, you really do, from the legal challenges, because these days, everybody's suing everybody. And if that phenomenon hasn't happened here, then you're lucky, because we see it everywhere where, an applicant will get the rezoning, and then the neighbors will sue because they don't like the decision. So when it goes to court, the judge is going to look at those 5 rezoning criteria and say, did they justify all of them? Or did the city just throw it out to them even though it doesn't match the comprehensive plan? So it's a tough love kind of thing I'm giving you here. But to protect yourselves, you need to stay with that legal standard. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, it's something that